I'm Jason Furman. I'm the Aetna Professor of the Practice of Economic Policy, and I'm jointly at the Harvard Kennedy School and the Economics Department of Harvard University.
Amazing. Can you talk a little bit more about immigration for us? Specifically, to start, like how demographic trends, so in the past, historically, women entering the workforce and trends in immigration have contributed to the US economy over time.
Yeah, there are lots and lots and lots of different dimensions to immigration. It has an impact on culture, it has an impact on politics, but it's also probably the number one most powerful force operating in the US economy right now as well. A large fraction of the economic growth that we're experiencing, a large fraction of the job growth that we're experiencing is happening because of immigration.
Yeah, so kind of building on to that, you hear in the news all the time how immigration is impacting Native workers and how, you know, foreign workers entering the US are taking jobs away from Native workers. Can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of, what the data actually suggests?
Yeah, there's a remarkable fact, which is measured relative prior to COVID, the number of American born workers has actually gone down slightly. So people born here have, it would seem, lost ground a little bit. All of the job gains, the millions and millions of jobs that have been added in the last several years, have all gone to people born outside the United States. Now, if you're just focused on Americans, you might say, isn't that terrible? Americans, people born in the United States, they've lost out on jobs. Well, it turns out that job loss isn't because they're not getting jobs, it's because they're getting older and retiring and don't want jobs as much as they used to. And in fact, if anything, every time an immigrant wants a job in the United States, largely they get a job and it doesn't come at the expense of someone who is born here in the United States. In fact, it generates a little bit of economic activity that even helps people who were born in the United States.
Right. So there's sort of two different pieces to that question then. So with these, foreign born workers who are entering the United States that are potentially, gaining some of these jobs that are passed back down from the older generations that are no longer occupying those jobs. What is that doing to the economy of the US generally? Is that helping or hurting the economy?
So the US, like other advanced economies, has an aging population. More baby boomers every year are retiring. If you look at Japan, which has an even more aging population and no immigration, there you see actually the number of people working falls year after year after year, and their economy barely grows. Europe has a somewhat older population than the United States. It has a decent amount of immigration, but it has a hard time getting immigrants to actually work. The employment rate for immigrants in Europe is on the low side. The United States is right now the envy of the advanced economies in the world. No one else has growth like the United States. And the difference here is our population is a little bit less old than elsewhere, but also that we attract a lot of immigrants. And also we have a system in which the immigrants we attract tend to be coming here for economic reasons, really looking for work. And in the booming economy we've had in the last recent couple of years, the strong demand that we've had in our economy, they have been able to find those jobs, without it coming at the expense of anyone else.
I mean, I guess honestly, out of curiosity, and this is probably an impossible forecasting question, but say looking into the future as this baby boomer generation continues to retire over and over, you're saying, so, immigrants are supporting them by taking up the jobs that they didn't have, and then, paying additional taxes, and then also the care jobs, right, to actually make sure that those retirees are still, cared for in all the different ways that retirees need to be. But do you sort of see that as offsetting this huge gap as the birth rate in the US declines? Do you think the immigrants entering the US that is helping? Will that offset any future losses that we'll have by this massive this cohort retiring?
Yeah, so to keep a population constant without immigration, every woman needs to have on average 2.1 children. That's what's called the replacement rate. And in the United States, we've been below 2.1 for 50 years now. And so, absent immigration, we'd have basically each pair of people in the country, a man and a woman, wouldn't have as many children as they themselves were. We have had a growing population because of immigration. And when you look at people who do forecasts for the next couple decades, they think the United States population will continue to grow. And that growth is entirely due to immigration. But of course, that depends on the choices we make. Future policymakers could decide to limit immigration. They could decide to expel people that were here in the United States without being authorized to be here. And so it's very much a policy choice as to whether we want to be a country that's growing and expanding, or a country that's shrinking and contracting.
So can I ask, kind of, building off of that, this population of immigrants that will continue to help this need, this offset part of the economy, between documented and undocumented workers, how much of that is coming from documented, how much of that is coming from undocumented, and the other things that are attributed to potential declines in other parts of health in the U.S. economy, or the U.S. in general, that's attributed or associated with undocumented workers. How do you see that share? What do you see the relationship there, pros and cons?
Yeah, so the U.S. tends not to get a lot of average immigrants. We get something that's called bimodal. A lot of our immigrants have actually much higher education than average. Maybe they even have like a medical degree or a Ph.D. from their country, and they come to the United States. And then you got a lot of immigrants who don't have a high school degree in the United States. And the U.S. population tends to be more in the middle, with you went to high school and did 2 years of college. The immigrants tend to be at two extremes. Those two extremes are also very correlated with immigration that is legal and authorized, and immigration where people come to this country and are not authorized to work in this country and stay in this country. The precise numerical breakdown is one that unfortunately no one knows the answer to, because the fact that you're not authorized means you're basically not showing up as such in the statistics. No one's asking you that question. No one's answering that question. And so we have about 10 million people who have come to the United States since COVID, and we just don't know how many of them were authorized, how many were not authorized, and we don't even know if that 10 million number I said, that itself was just an estimate, not a really precise measure.
So you're saying, and you don't know, but you're saying your hypothesis is, or you're leaning towards the assumption that the costs on the rest of the economy of undocumented workers, in terms of healthcare, in terms of education, in terms of suppressed wages in other ways, doesn't offset the benefits of immigrants that you're saying are highly educated and filling these other jobs in parts of sectors that were otherwise unable to be filled, and contributing and stimulating the economy in other ways.
Right. Well,
Okay.
even unauthorized workers at the federal level are making a net positive contribution. If you come here at age 40, you're paying payroll taxes right away. You're not collecting Social Security benefits for another 25 years, if ever. And so you're paying more money into the system than you're getting. At the state and local level, the evidence is a little bit more ambiguous and more mixed as to what you're doing. But pretty much every type of immigrant, at least at the federal level and possibly overall, is on net, paying more in taxes than they're collecting in benefits. And the National Academy of Sciences has studied that issue quite carefully and reached that conclusion.
Right. Right. And so just to reiterate, you're saying that the share of sort of this prime working age, this, I think you've written before, it's 25 to 54. Is that correct? It's around
Yeah,
that
that's
age?
how economists define prime age.
Okay, you're saying that has continued to rise since the pandemic. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. If you look at the share of people born in the United States who are working between the age of 25 and 54, it's actually gone up since before the pandemic. And to me, that's the strongest evidence that immigrants aren't taking anyone's jobs. In fact, you're more likely to be employed today than in the past if you were born here in the United States. It's just, there's a lot more people that went from age 70 to 75 over the last 5 years and decided they wanted to retire as a result.
Right. So I guess what would you suggest if you were to make a suggestion in terms of a more comprehensive immigration plan that, is able to sort of offset illegal, or I guess protect against, what would you say? We'll
Yeah.
cut that question a little bit.
Yeah. Look, here's the tricky thing. Our economy could not function without immigrants. But it also is a terrible way for an economy in a country to function by having sort of widespread, breaking of laws. And so what that says to me is we need to change the law, and we can't change it to say, hey, no more immigrants. Um, we instead need to say, we are welcoming a lot more immigrants. We want a lot more people to come to this country. We're going to make it possible for you to do that. And then you can tighten up the border and start to enforce the law. So what would I do? I would have three parts. One is at the higher skilled end of the distribution. You come here, you get a degree in the United States, college degree, you can stay here, you can work. You want to contribute and add to our country? Great. Thank you very much. We'd love to have you. Number two, you need a pathway for the more than 10 million people that are in the United States and not authorized to work. That's something that I think is decent and humane. That's something I think is also good for our economy. They're actually already here. This will reduce uncertainty, enable people to contribute, even more to the economy. Third, you need to expand immigration, more broadly than even those two steps would do. And then finally, you do need to tighten up your border, do things like more work verification to make it harder for people to work if they're not authorized to work here. But you cannot do all that tightening up unless you simultaneously take these steps to bring more people in. Otherwise, you would ruin our economy while I think heartlessly and cruelly enforcing a set of laws that we basically had previously sent the message are not going to be enforced.
Yeah. Thank you so much.